Greetings scholars and welcome back to another video of Avanexplains. Now on this Beijing cram video we're going to be talking about the art and music section of the World Scholars Cup, specifically the unclear creation section, when, the who, how, when and what confound, as the World Scholars Cup staff have so aptly named it. So without further ado, let's get straight into it on this Avanexplains, the unclear creations of art and music. First up is The Awakening Slave by Michelangelo. Now, in this work by the famous Italian sculptor and painter of the Renaissance, one can note the figure of a man trying to escape the marble block from which he resides. Now, this is a common example of what Michelangelo and the people of his time called non finito style, literally not finished in Italian. And it referred to the fact that the piece was purposefully left unfinished to give a sort of message within that style itself. Now, within The Awakening Slave, we can sort of guess that the message is something about how the battle with slavery is something we have to fight for eternity, and that freedom is not something that comes easily. We have to struggle a lot for it. Now, obviously, that might not be what Michelangelo intended. For all we know, he just made four slaves and servants of Italy attempting to break free of a marble. But the fact that he chose slaves and servants instead of normal people gives us a sort of confirmation that it's something about slavery and freedom, something that we'll explore a lot more in our history curriculum. Next up, Isleworth Mona Lisa by unknown. Well, when you visit the Louvre in Paris, or Louvre, I have no idea how to pronounce it, you're probably there for some very famous paintings. One of them is a fairly ordinary painting of a woman seated in a normal position with a very, very, very mysterious expression on her face. It sort of looks like a smile and a grin and a smirk at the same time. Good job, Italians. Now, this is the Mona Lisa, one of, if not the most famous piece of artwork in the entire world. Yet, very few people know that the Mona Lisa actually has a sister, the Isleworth Mona Lisa. Now, it was named for the British estate where it hung for several decades, and it was bought by British art collector Hugh Blaker. Currently, we have no idea where it is, and we have no idea who owns it officially, but we do know that the Mona Lisa in the Isleworth version looks very younger, or at least slightly younger, not very younger, slightly younger than the one that Leonardo da Vinci painted. The mysterious thing is we don't know who painted it because there's no signature on the artwork or any sort of record of where the buyer got it from. Now we have to assume that either A, someone else did paint it and not Leonardo da Vinci, or B, Leonardo actually painted it as a sexed up copy of his masterpiece. Whatever the case, the Isleworth Mona Lisa is still something we're scratching our heads over, so it might as well go in our Unsolved Mysteries section. Next up, Woman-Oka by Wilhelm de Kooning. Now, on a surface glance, this is a very simple artwork. It's something typical of Wilhelm de Kooning's style, and it depicts a woman, very hard to see, but still there, underneath a sort of mix of colors and lines and forms on a canvas. Now, you probably wonder why it's in this section. Well, the interesting thing is, Woman-Oka was actually stolen from the museum where it hung, and here is the full story. On November 27, 1985, an older woman and younger man asked the University of Arizona Museum of Art guard on duty if they could tour the place and ask about some of the artwork. Now the guard obviously obliged, and after some time the male companion returned from an upper floor and they too left the museum. Now when the guard went on his patrol duty, he noticed that Woman-Oka had been removed from its frame, just like it had not been there at all. Now there was no suspicion that the man had obviously hidden it under his coat. It was cold after all on the exit, but somehow the security guard didn't notice that. Good job, security guard. I wonder if you got promoted or demoted after that incident. No fingerprints were found, no security cameras existed at the time, so the FBI was called in to help them out. But it took quite some time. It wasn't until 2017 that a nephew of Rita Alter and Jerry Alter discovered the painting lying around his deceased parents' house in New York. As of now, the painting has yet to be restored or hung up in its original place because the FBI is still investigating whether or not the Alters actually carried out the crime or simply bought the painting from another source. So, as far as we know, It appears Wilhelm's work has had some unwanted attention, although exactly why it was stolen, we don't quite know. Did it maybe have a hidden message within it, or was it some sort of revenge against the painter? Maybe he'd wronged the stealer, or perhaps something far more simple of how much value an artwork like that has. Mike the Headless Chicken by David Herrera. Now, unlike all the other parts of this list, this is a sculpture, not a painting, and it tells the story of a real-life headless chicken in Fruta, Colorado. Now, Mike was actually a chicken who was beheaded by his owner, Lloyd Olson, but he still managed to live, despite without a head. He managed to even try pecking and crowing, despite not having his upper, head, really. It appeared that Olsen had actually cut just beyond the point where the brain would have lost consciousness and where the earlobe would have been able to still be attached to the body. So over the next 2 years, Mike would continue to tour the country, but would eventually die after choking on some kernels of corn in a hotel. Scientists then realized that the axe swing that was meant to kill Mike had actually missed the jugular vein, causing a clot to prevent him from bleeding out, and the brainstem was still left behind, allowing him to perform regular functions. Now, Mike the Headless Chicken is depicted as some sort of mechanical chicken, just like how we often perceive humans as being natural fibers of body and animals as well. But on the inside, science has been able to explain them much the same way science can explain a clock or how a mechanism works. Finally, for the art, we have La Sagrada Familia by Gaudi. If you were to visit Madrid right now, you can probably see this structure jutting way out of the Madrid skyline. And right now, it is a very interesting sculpture because it is an unfinished construction project, a church to be precise, that has taken 137 years of constant work and renovation. Now, in 1882, the original architect laid down the foundations for the work, but died a year after. So, famed Catalan architect Antoni Gaudi took over the project and scrapped the original design in order for a much grander vision to take life. Despite having died a couple years after that, in 1926, the church continues to be worked upon as a succession of new architects come in and add their own style to Gaudi's original plans. This is sort of like a modge podge of different artists coming together. We have no idea what Gaudi's original plan would have been like, but we do know that the church, when it is constructed in 2026, fingers crossed, will not look anything like what Gaudi had imaginally planned it to be. Interestingly, the Sagrada Familia has been in the news recently because the builders finally got a permit on the plot of land it was built on to continue building it. I don't know why I didn't have a permit before, but legal laws. Now on to music. Symphony No. 10 by Ludwig van Beethoven and Barry Cooper. Yet another legendary composer. Ludwig van Beethoven was actually dead when this work was first performed in 1988. He was, 161 years dead, actually. It's what musicians call a hypothetical work. The entire piece was composed from the fragmentary sketches of the sheet music that he had lying around his study after his death. Barry Cooper took up the job of compiling, composing, and ultimately publishing the symphony, first performed by the Royal Philharmonic Society in London, to whom Beethoven had originally offered the new Symphony 2. Apparently, after his completion of his 9th symphony, Beethoven had finished work on his string quartets, but also worked on a secret 10th symphony that he was meant to have presented to his friend Karl Holz, but died before it was fully completed. Next up, Trying to Get the Feeling Again by the Carpenters. Yet another piece lost to time. This was originally written by David Pomeranz and sung by Barry Manilow in 1976, when it became a top 10 hit. However, the Carpenters actually recorded the song a year earlier for their 6th album. But during the recording session, however, there wasn't enough space on the vinyl disc, this is an age before MP3s and whatnot, to fit the song with the rest of the album. So, the Carpenters scrapped it and put it on record in their archives. A couple of years later, in 1994, backing singer and band co-founder Richard Carpenter was searching through the old tapes to find only yesterday's backing track, but also found Trying to Get the Feeling Again, and it was later republished that same year with its original recording as a sort of resurrected piece that was long forgotten. Next up is probably the most interesting piece, in my opinion, The Unfinished Symphony by Franz Schubert. So, Franz Schubert's Symphony No. 8 in B minor, as it's otherwise known, is a musical composition that Franz started in 1822 but left unfinished despite having lived for 6 more years. When the work was discovered, only 2 movements had been developed as well as a scherzo of 2 pages. A scherzo is a smaller composition that forms part of a movement. Brian Newbold, the composer who later finished the composition, has suggested that this work was later going to have been a transitional piece for Rosamunde, a play that Schubert helped to compose the music for. But it is circumstantial because we don't actually know what Franz was going to do with this piece. All we know is that he dedicated it to the Graz Music Society in Austria, but was not actually able to present it. He only presented some of it to his friend, Anselm Hottenbrunner, who had some of the original sheet music lying around his house. The mystery really lies in why didn't Schubert present this piece much earlier, and why didn't Hottenbrunner tell the people at the orchestra that this piece had existed? Because it wasn't until 1865, 40 years after Schubert had died, that Hottenbrunner finally revealed the piece's existence to anyone. So why is that the case? We may never know. Requiem in D minor, Wolfgang Mozart and Franz Sussmayer. I am not going to play this entire piece for you because it's 55 minutes long. It is a very long piece, but it's otherwise known as piece K626, and it's an interesting story behind this work. Rumor has it was commissioned by one Count Franz von Walsegg-Stubach, who liked to pass off the work of others as his own, an 1800s copycat, if you will. But he even made Mozart sign a contract for this work stating that it was belonging to Count Franz, and that it was meant to be played at the anniversary of his wife's death on Valentine's. That's a pretty bad day to die, I'll be honest, but don't know why he wanted music for that. Just ask him. So the old composer obviously obliged, but his glory days were behind him. Old age had caught up and he was suffering from fevers and sicknesses. So he spent the final months in 1791 to the writing of 2 operas, The Magic Flute and La Clemenza di Tito. From time to time he would work on his Requiem, but he only finished the orchestration, the introit, the Kyrie, the sequence, and offertorium. His student Franz Sussmayer would complete the final parts of the Benedictus, the Agnus Dei, and the Communio before finally presenting it to the world. Truly an amazing piece that you should probably listen to if you have an hour to spare. Finally, for this video, Free as a Bird by the Beatles. This is a song with another fairly confusing and somewhat interesting history. Released as a single in 1995 as a promotional teaser for the Beatles anthology, Free as a Bird was criticized for being different and unusual for the Beatles. It was dreary, the lyrics were very repetitive, and the style of playing was just not up there to the Beatles' glory days in 1960. But what people didn't realize is that this piece had actually come about from 1977, when John Lennon, the guitarist, I believe, of the Beatles, recorded it for his own personal referential use and never released it to the public. Now, in a couple years after that, the Beatles had broken. Now, just before this, the Beatles had broken up as a band, and John Lennon was no longer part of the legendary composing band that dominated the 1960s and 70s. It wasn't until 1995 that Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr asked Lennon's widow, Yoko Ono, for some unreleased material to publicly record. Now, Free as a Bird was one of these materials, and she gave it to the band, who later said that it helped to bring them together for a short while thanks to this song in the memory of John Lennon, who had died when he was assassinated in 1980, just 3 years after he originally recorded this song, and 15 years before, it could finally be released to the public to hear. So scholars, that's it for our mysterious creations of art and music. What other parts of the curriculum would like to see explained before Beijing? I know it's cram week for all of you, it's cram week for me too, but hopefully we'll do well at Beijing. I promise all of you will do amazingly in the challenge and the ball. I believe in all of you, and I hope I've been able to help you in some way with both this video and my website. So once again, scholars, this is Avan Fada of Avanexplains, signing out.